Hello ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my name is Dominic and I'd like to welcome you all to the second season of Spotlight Game of Thrones, the series in which we take a look at some of the characters who feature in the A Song of Ice and Fire novels but are yet to be seen on the hit HBO show. So, if you love Game of Thrones and want to know more about the world and its characters outside of the TV show, you've come to the right place. Now this second season of the show will be delving back into the history of Westeros to take a look at all of the Targaryen kings who ruled the Seven Kingdoms for nigh on 300 years, and the very first of those kings was none other than the man who took it upon himself to unite the fractured realms of Westeros with nothing but hard work, keen military strategy, and a steadfast faith in his convictions. Oh, and dragons. He also had dragons. Today we will be looking at the very first Targaryen king to sit the Iron Throne of Westeros, none other than Aegon the Conqueror, first of his name. Before we get into Aegon though, let's take a quick look at the history of House Targaryen. The Targaryens were one of 40 families known as the Dragon Lords who ruled the Valyrian freehold from the ancient city of Valyria. Around 400 years before the events of Game of Thrones, the Valyrian freehold, which ruled much of Essos and was arguably the greatest superpower the world had ever known, was destroyed in a mysterious cataclysm known as the Doom of Valyria. Now, 12 years prior to the Doom of Valyria, a lady named Daenerys Targaryen, the daughter of Lord Aegon Targaryen, had a vision that Valyria would be destroyed by an unknown cataclysm, and so Lord Aegon, trusting his daughter's visions, packed up his things and relocated with his family to Dragonstone, the westernmost outpost that still happened to be under Valyrian rule at the time. Daenerys' visions did ultimately come true, and Valyria was destroyed and its influence across Essos dissipated. In the century that followed, violent power struggles erupted in the vacuum left behind by the Valyrians in a period known as the Century of Blood. Little is known of exactly what the Targaryens got up to in this time, but we know that their focus was on the east and not Westeros, and that their position upon Dragonstone, along with their alliances with other surviving Valyrian houses such as the Velaryons and the Celtigards of Claw Isle, allowed them to maintain a stranglehold on Blackwater Bay and dominion over the middle reaches of the Narrow Sea. Now that we know a little of the history of House Targaryen prior to their influence on Westeros, let's take a look at he who would become the conqueror of that land, Aegon Targaryen. Aegon Targaryen was born in 27 BC to Lord Aegon Targaryen and his wife Lady Valyna Velaryon at the Isle of Dragonstone. He is said to have been charismatic and commanding, yet solitary and somewhat of an enigma. Now little is known of Aegon's early years, but we do know that before he turned his attention to the west, a young Lord Aegon aided the free cities of Pentos and Tyrosh in the east against the free city of Volantis, who had long tried to fill the vacuum of power left behind by the Valyrians. We know that he flew to Pentos to meet its prince and then eventually to Lys upon the back of his dragon Balerion, where he proceeded to set the Volanti fleet ablaze. We also know that Aegon had in fact visited Westeros extensively before beginning his campaign of war. He is said to have visited the citadel of Old Town with his sister Visenya, the Arbor where he was a guest of Lord Redwine, and even to have visited Lannisport in the Westerlands. He also commissioned the construction of a large painted table that still sits in Dragonstone and depicts the geography and layout of Westeros in great detail. The map was painted without any borders to signify that Westeros should one day be one realm instead of many. Now I don't want to get into great detail regarding the specifics of Aegon's conquest of Westeros, as I don't want the video to be like 30 minutes long, and this is more concerned with the man himself and his rule as king, but I will go over the broad strokes for you. You see, although it appears that this conquest was something the Dragon Lord had long been considering, it wasn't until a failed marriage arrangement in which Argilac Durandon mutilated one of Aegon's envoys after Aegon suggested that Argilac's daughter marry his best friend and rumoured bastard brother Orys Baratheon. Although Aegon didn't respond to this act of disrespect and violence explicitly, he did send out ravens to all corners of Westeros, letting all the kings know that the dragon had arrived and that they could either bow or burn. The messages read, "From this day forth there would be but one king in Westeros. Those who bend the knee to Aegon of House Targaryen would keep their lands and titles. Those who took up arms against him would be thrown down, humbled and destroyed." From here on out, Aegon embarked upon a 2-year-long campaign to conquer and unite the lands of Westeros, along with his sister wives Visenya and Rhaenys and their dragons Vhagar, Meraxes and Balerion the Black Dread. He was successful in subjugating and unifying 6 of the 7 regions of Westeros, with only the country of Dorne able to repel his advances. Dorne would eventually join the 7 kingdoms, but they would do so through marriage and on their own terms. Aegon, who had converted to the faith of the Seven even before his conquest, dated the start of his reign on the day that the High Septum anointed him in Old Town. But he didn't rule from there, nor from Dragonstone as many expected, but instead he made his seat at the Aegon Fort, where his fleet had first landed. A settlement had begun to grow around it, and it would eventually go on to become King's Landing. Aegon then took all the swords of his fallen enemies and crafted an asymmetric eyesore of twisted metal that would ever be known after as the Iron Throne. Aegon's reign as the first king of Westeros was, for the most part, peaceful and prosperous. He was diligent in his attempts to appease both the faith and the small folk. He made many royal progresses across the realm, where he took care to pay respects to the varying laws of the many domains, and he was fair and firm in a way that earned him great respect. The one thing that marred his reign was Dorne, and his inability to bring the Dornish men into the fold of his new kingdom. A conflict erupted while he was in charge, and in this war he lost his sister wife Rhaenys when she and her dragon Meraxes were killed. Aegon loved Rhaenys as he had never done Visenya, for Visenya was stern and strict, and the two of them quarrelled often, but Rhaenys was curious and kind, and even the small folk loved her greatly. Aegon, furious after the death of his beloved, placed bounties on the heads of Dornish lords, leading to much tragedy in the years to follow, and the Dornish responded in kind by sending their own assassins to murder the king. They nearly succeeded, ambushing Aegon on the streets of King's Landing, and were it not for Visenya and her Valyrian steel sword dark sister, Aegon might have died that day. After this attack, Visenya was able to convince Aegon to establish the Kingsguard, an elite unit of loyal knights who would be sworn by an oath similar to that of the Night's Watch, to forsake all lands and titles in service to their king. Although Aegon initially refused the idea, believing his current guard to be sufficient, Visenya drew dark sister and cut the king's cheek before any of the men at his side could react in time to stop her. "Your guards are slow and lazy," she told him, and Aegon was inclined to agree. Aegon ended his hostilities with Dorne after receiving a mysterious letter from the Dornish, the contents of which are yet to be revealed. As his city expanded, he eventually commissioned the building of great walls to surround it and the castle, called the Red Keep, that sat atop Aegon's Hill, where the Aegon Fort had once been. Although it remained the seat of his power, Aegon Targaryen loved Dragonstone best, and it is there that he spent much of his later years. In the year 37 AC, while telling his grandsons tales of his conquests, Aegon the Conqueror suffered a stroke and died peacefully. He was 64 years old. His body was burned in the yard of Dragonstone Citadel in the custom of the Valyrian people. Thank you all so much for watching this first video in the new season of Spotlight focused on the Targaryen kings. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to hit that like button down below, as it really does help the channel out, and why not subscribe for more content like this. You can also check out season 1 of Spotlight on the channel, along with lots more Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire content. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.